Hey, everybody, welcome and thanks for joining us today. I want to thank Tamar and everyone at LCDQ for partnering with us on what we're anticipating is a great event today. We're very excited also to welcome Margaret Russell and Michael S. Margaret, what a cast of characters, the two of you. Where to begin? Margaret, the former editor of Architectural Digest, VP editor-in-chief of Elle Decor, 3 best-selling books, which if you don't watch out, our marketing team will be contacting you for book signings. Emeritus trustee at the Kennedy Center, trustee of God's Love We Deliver, which I'm sure you're extremely proud of, design advisory team for the Obama Presidential Center, advisory council for the Philip Johnson Glass House, which is really interesting. I have a picture, a photograph of this house in my office that I always look at for inspiration. Michael is one of the most original and respected talents in the industry. He also is the designer of one of my favorite lighting fixtures in our collections. Michael has an international profile of residential, hospitality, and commercial clients. Michael believes everyone should live with things they love. I think we all can agree to that. Michael and Margaret will be discussing Michael's new book, Designing History, the Extraordinary Art and Style of the Obama White House. And as usual, the first 50 registrants and attendees to this discussion will be gifted a copy of the book by Circle Lighting. So we are going to try and get to questions at the end of the discussion. So please just enter your questions through Facebook Live. And now stand by for Margaret and Michael. So thanks everybody and enjoy.
Thank you, Gail. You have been such a leader in the design community, and I appreciate your supporting Michael's book in this way, and also for partnering with LCDQ. Tamar Michigan has been terrific in organizing this, and I'm thrilled to be a part of LCDQ again. You know, I helped launch the event in 2009 when I was the editor of Elle Decor, and actually over the years, Michael and I have co-hosted lots of Legends events. And so I'm happy to be talking with you, Michael, now about this book, which is great meaning to both of us, such great meaning. Let's see, let's get started. Michael, you're here with the president, walking down the colonnade, which the former president, which leads from the residence to the Oval Office. Can you bring us back to the beginning, like back in November 2008, of all the designers in America? Why you? How did this come to be? How did this happen?
Well, that's such a good question. I mean, I was just the most talented, so that was immediately no. First I want to. I know. No, first I want to thank Gail for the introduction. I was just in the Circa Lighting shop in New York about 2 weeks ago, and it's amazing how much product, and I mean, I just ordered some floor lamps for myself, and I just started. I mean, the depth of the collection of the things that are happening there is always so exciting, and just the quality is so amazing. It's always it's one of the it's like going in there, it was really sort of filled all these needs we had, and it's clearly at a price that is kind of science fiction to me always, but just it's really extraordinary what you guys have all been able to achieve. And I want to thank you for that and for the introduction. I just want to say, you said my book. Honestly, it's Margaret and I's book. I mean, Margaret worked on this so tirelessly. And if she's single for the rest of her life, it's because of me, because her most valuable dating years were spent in a stack of White House books, pouring through them
That's an awful thing to say. Stop that. Can we please go back? I'm back in November 2008 when there was lots of gossip. Everyone was calling me saying, who do you think is going to be, who's going to redecorate the White House? So
why me? Okay. Well, why me? I mean, clearly I was kidding. The situation is that I was really crazily lucky, and then I had a friend who, someone called Catherine Malkin, who lived in the same building as the newly appointed social secretary to the White House, a dear friend of mine now called Desiree Rogers, who is one of the most, was and is still one of the most glamorous women in Chicago, and was a real conduit to the Obamas in terms of what the White House would be, how the sort of social entertaining aspect of the White House would really sort of fall into place, and what would become a part of the real DNA and culture of an Obama White House. And Catherine Wade, and listen, I'm gonna give your books to Desiree. And I was like, sure, whatever. I had no expectation. And then in that, what Margaret and I sort of well documented in the book, it talks about this letter she wrote, which I only read when you started to gather the information and stuff from all these parties to put together for the book. There was this sort of glowing testament to me, which it's kind of great that I didn't see it until now, because it kind of made me want to lay down. It was so overwhelmingly positive. And I think that the real situation was that I think that they were looking for somebody who could do it. I mean, literally, it sounds simple, but who had the capacity, the office, the ability to be discreet, the ability to draw on sort of professional relationships, and to, who had some bulk, some gravitas, who could kind of do this. And so I was overwhelmed by the prospect of it, but I also sort of, like all important decisions in my life or things that are stressful, I kind of floated above my body until I could kind of inhabit it again and try to stay calm. And this began this extraordinary journey, which continues now. So it was a kind of like getting hit by lightning in a good way.
Well, I remember the time, because even though you weren't supposed to tell anybody, I was aware of what you were doing, and I was sort of amazed that you flew to Chicago, you were interviewed. The Obamas are really private people. I know when I was doing the photo research for the book, like, there were so few pictures of what their house in Chicago looked like. They're private about their family. How did you prep for that meeting? Like, what did you take when you flew out there? I would have been terrified. How did that meeting go? I know it was friendly, and Mrs. Obama hugged you, and you had a great chat.
Oh, it was amazing.
What did you bring? Did you bring a presentation?
I didn't really bring a presentation. I think I brought some samples of fabric that were, my first exchange ever. And it was like a forwarded email from Mrs. Obama. And it was like that the girls' rooms should be.
You were just saying about going to Chicago, but you know what? We've got a lot to see in Chicago. Is the past. So let's talk about the logistics of Election Day 2008 was November 4th. There were like fewer than 80 days until Inauguration Day.
Right.
You didn't really you sort of got the gig the beginning of December, because Thanksgiving was a late Thanksgiving. What happened? I actually have this, which I know was a godsend. Tell us sort of how the White House, what the transition was for helping you and the Obama family prepare for the move.
So, no, I think for the Obamas, it was, for Mrs. Obama and a few members of her senior staff, I think it was great. They'd gone through the house, and seen the children's bedrooms and kind of understood what what it was really going to be like to live in the house. For me, having been in the downstairs of the building, but not ever being upstairs, it was a kind of different experience. And I think that I had to sort of use what you see in front of you, photographs, this website, whitehousemuseum.org, that I discovered that was sort of an independent thing. There's a picture from it that became a huge source, because even though I had these sort of glamour shots of various rooms, it was very difficult to imagine what the rooms look like in 3D. And looking at old historic photographs on this site, I could kind of see the room from a variety of angles, and therefore kind of in my head understand a little bit more of the physicality. The one thing that I never, ever prepared for or understood was how tall these rooms were proportionate to like their dimension, which was kind of shocking when I first went into space. But so I had a great map basically, but I didn't have a run through. So I think that I had to kind of come up with solutions and ways in which to make the house, sort of as impactful as possible on day one.
And tell us about the warehouse, or what's available to you in terms of the White House before. I know you always laugh when we talk about the warehouse.
I always laugh about it because I had this vision that the warehouse, which is essentially a kind of in a secret location, they really take this thing very seriously, and has, post Mrs. Kennedy, nothing is really sold off from the White House ever. So everything, no matter how insignificant, a chair, a lamp, whatever is, goes into storage as a kind of kind of example or a piece or a sort of historical object. So the really good things are in the White House. There's a few things there, but there's a lot of sofas and stuff from old administrations. I mean, it's lots of rolled up rugs, things like that, but nothing really, no kind of jewel, no, kind of John Singer Sargent painting leaning against the wall. I was sadly disappointed in what was in there. But yeah, I could borrow some of that stuff. That really wasn't what I did on the first day. Really what I did was the Bushes had left the house in such incredibly good shape. It was completely movable, innable on move-in day. They'd really left it in beautiful move-in ready shape, and the rooms were put together in a very tasteful way. So what I really tried to do is bring contemporary art in. It was the one thing I could do that was fast, that had very little financial impact, because we were borrowing from national institutions like the National Gallery and the Hirshhorn. And immediately I could change the feeling and the vibe of the rooms and make them younger and more kind of charismatic. There you see a painting from the National Gallery by Ed Ruscha, being hung up on move-in day. That I could do. And then I had some other stuff. I brought kids sheeting that you helped me get through Anthropologie and a few other sources. I brought a new bed in that I had purchased, that I lent to the Obamas, a kind of maple bed you see here, it made up on move-in day. Things, I just thought it was weird and kind of slightly sort of, I don't know, it just didn't feel kind of like the correct thing to have the bed of the former president, no matter who they were, slept in, a day later by the new incoming president. It felt a little weird. So it was something I felt that was really symbolic and kind of significant, that they would start a new administration in a new bed for them. So those were things that we did. And I brought in some lamps you see here. I brought flowers in. I moved some art around. There you see this beautiful painting by James McNeill Whistler that belonged to the permanent collection of the White House, put next to the president's side of the bed, which when I saw him later that night in his evening attire coming back from the balls, he said to me, "There's a Whistler next to my bed." He was clearly kind of aware, and it had real significance to him that's the situation. His bedroom was in the White House the very first night he slept there. So we were really happy with that. And then the rest of the renovations and the redecorating spaces stuff came after this.
So post to the first night, for the first few weeks, it's basically you had sort of brought in some personal things, but it was really living with, because the Bushes had left it in such beautiful condition. I mean, this is their wall covering, their curtains, their bed skirt, but fresh linens, flowers. It was more finishing touches, and then moving all their personal stuff in and stocking towels and things. And basically, I remember you telling me that almost everybody who works in the White House pitches in, except for the kitchen staff. Like people move, because nobody is allowed to touch it, right? There's security.
Yeah, no, it's a quick transfer. I mean, I think, listen, we were in certain situations, and I believe that'll be probably with President and President-elect and Dr. Biden. I think they have a lot of stuff from a house to bring into this. The Obamas left their house in Chicago basically intact. There are times where, for example, President and Mrs. Reagan didn't have a house or didn't own a house when they moved into the White House. So they had a kind of house full of personal effects to bring. That makes a house much quicker, your own and homier, and, kind of immediately, I think, has a real impact, which is wonderful. But I also think it's a lot of logistics to do in 4 hours. So, we had the best of both, which is, so you see the chairs in this picture were ultimately recovered. I was able to use the sort of pin the bed skirt that was on that bed that I had lent to the Obamas, reuse the old bed skirt from the Bush bed, things like that. So, it was we had very big impact using, as you said, the new sheets, new towels, new bed, and then the art, and it went into a really wonderfully organized background. So we had the best of all worlds. They were completely comfortable and at home from day one.
And as you were planning the move-in, you were also presenting to the Obamas when they were staying at the Hay Adams from the beginning of January on, sort of your plans for what would happen when you started to really redecorate. And this is one of the renderings that you had given to them. Tell us about sort of that process and how it worked.
Well, I think that Mrs. Obama and the president, but Mrs. Obama in particular, who I spent so much time with in these early days, kind of going over stuff, was so. The children were her number one priority, to make sure that her children, who were moving from a really wonderful, but domestic scaled house into this, the ultimate living above the shop, a museum, people constantly around you. I think she was very concerned. Her number one concern was that her children be really comfortable on day one, and that there not be foreboding, or kind of, that they just could immediately start school and feel normal from day, the first minute that they were there. And we really worked at that. That was the number one thing. But then I think we tried to, it was, again, the master was really important for me, or primary bedroom, as we now say, was really important for me to get right, because I really had this idea that you want the leader of the free world, you want the commander in chief to get a good night's sleep, and you want a couple who's young and dynamic with children already stressed in many different directions, but especially adding all this to their plate, for them to be able to have some sort of retreat, so that they had a personal life beyond being in these big sort of hollowed spaces. So this is the renovation of that space ultimately. I was super lucky that Mark Matisak, who I worked with for a very long time, who's a really talented artist and collaborator, was able to help me produce these renderings. And what was great is they really communicated very directly this hybrid of style, this idea of White House, history and what had come before, but very much sort of weaving into it what would become sort of Obama style in the White House. And it was really important for me that they kind of understood the intellectual process about taking elements of their personality and things I'd seen at their house that I was sort of, sort of affected by, touched by, inspired by, the amount of books, the simplicity of what they were drawn to, the quality of what they were drawn to, and always the appreciation of much sort of cultural stuff, diverse, like African sculpture and paintings, and all sorts of things that they had already collected in their own house in Chicago, and really kind of taking that DNA and kind of expanding it outward into the way the White House would feel and live for them, but very much framed by all the weight of history and all these other, presidents and first families that come before.
Tell me about the canopy bed. I know that you talked me into a 4-poster in my apartment when I didn't really want one, and now I love it. Why do you use so many beds? What the canopy beds?
I mean, again, I think that there are elements about decoration which are not. I'm trying to think about that are experienced, that are immersive. I think they're things that are kind of almost primitive, and I think that as humans, we're drawn to these kind of cozy spaces, and you want to feel secure and sort of insulated and kind of protected. And I always feel that sort of the 4-poster bed is a kind of fusion of two great ideas. One is your sort of cozy space where you feel really protected and kind of, it's like your den, it's a cave for primates, whatever, that you kind of feel like you're really protected. And then you combine it with the height and the verticality. And there's a reason that sort of royal bedrooms and, over time, there's been these sort of high beds that they sort of give stature. So there are two things that I love sort of together. One is a kind of acknowledgement and a kind of raising up of people's psyche. which also do a really good job of it in the room. Just literally, technically, it's creating architecture in a room, right? It's a building in a city. Basically, you're creating this thing. And then fundamentally, I think when you sleep in a four-poster bed, I tend to think people sleep better because they feel like they're safe and somehow protected by this cocoon. So I think there are two things which go very well together. And I think there were two things which were essential to this bedroom. It's a big, giant, tall space. The bed added architecture and kind of literally worked as a visual step down from the ceiling, as does the chandelier, to make it more approachable. And then when you would climb in it, I think that you felt that the world was outside of your square of protectiveness. So whatever was happening outside, whatever unrest in the world, whatever financial crisis, whatever, I had this desire to create a kind of safe bubble where they could get rest and sleep and prepare for what they had to do the next day.
Okay, that makes sense. And then this is the other side of the room where you've moved the Whistler to over the fireplace. But you said they didn't really use the fire there. So
no, they didn't use a fire in this room. I mean, fires in the White House are not necessarily the most, I mean, anything that has all this curatorial issues and stuff. I mean, there were very few fires that would be lit, so they didn't use it very much. And then this shows, again, this kind of very shorthanded idea that only to me and very few people would make any sense. But this room, this is Gracie Square's wallpaper that is traditionally painted on with sort of chinoiserie scenes, and this sort of was this textural, again, there's a lot of rooms where there's texture or pattern on the walls in order to kind of compress them, bring them down because the rooms are so big, and make them more humanist in scale. But then also this had a kind of nice subtle undertone, this was a room that in various incarnations, including Mrs. Reagan's incarnation, had Gracie wallpaper with chinoiserie. So this had the texture and the wrap, if you will, of a very subtle pattern, but it didn't have the birds and trees and stuff on top of it. So there's, again, even in my own head, there's a kind of sort of slight, subtle, almost unseen connection to former presidents and their families and that choice of material.
Oh, hold it. We're not going to do this. Okay. Okay. So tell us about the private and public rooms. Like, what does the White House decorator really work on? It's an enormous house, but it's not as if you can do everything all together.
Right. No, I think I agree. And I think, there's certain things that come up for rotation in the public spaces that you're asked to comment on, a rug for the East Room or a curtain that needs to be redone in a different sort of public room. And that was something that I was able to do because the two administrations meant I didn't have 4 years to deal with it. I had 8 years to deal with it. But basically, listen, some families have done virtually nothing. It depends. I think, again, because there were 8 years, because this was a young, dynamic family who used this as a real family house, I think that it was important that rooms feel personal and domestic and approachable. Again, using the stripe that I made for the walls of the dining room, which is the family dining room that they used on their floor, was about not just creating kind of visual interest and holding contemporary paintings. It was about kind of bringing the room in a little bit because you can see how big it is. And I put a sofa in there, and you did tricks in order to make it really feel like a normal house as opposed to living in a sort of big palatial space.
Well, and I love this room because it reflects their focus, the Obama's focus on art and culture and the paintings. And it does really seem very full of life for a rather formal room with soaring ceilings. And I love the idea of high-low. I think you can see it here, the barn candle holders that are against
Pottery barn.
18th
Yeah.
mirror. Yeah, no, I think the high-low aspect of some of the things that you brought to the White House was really marvelous. And the family sitting room, I think, shows what you really did to personalize these spaces. I remember you telling me that Mrs. Obama had said that she wanted her girls to come home and feel like, come home from school and say, this is where we live. Like, it really is a
right,
home.
exactly.
And this is a room where they spend a lot of time, right?
Yeah, this is called 220. It's the family sitting room. It has been used and was used as President Kennedy's bedroom. Mrs. Kennedy was in what's the primary bedroom next door. I believe this is President Trump's bedroom now. But in what I loved, again, this kind of conduit, this kind of, this kind of whole reaching back to history. The high boy chest of drawers was in the exact same place when it was President Kennedy's bedroom. So there's this kind of always this like fun game for me to connect it to the past in some way. But this is a room that was for me the most pure distillation of White House history, the architecture, the doors, the stuff that is so identifiable, and the view making it the White House, but also the Obama style, right? Something, this Stefan Pagani light fixture, which they love and is now in their offices in Washington. This Roman Thomas furniture that in all these kind of beautiful hand weaves, this carpet I designed for Mansour that we made special for the room. So that, and art borrowed from the National Gallery. This was the sort of purest sort of, fusion, if you will, of what is personal to the Obamas, their desire for things which are a bit simpler, a bit qualitative in terms of hand of man and craftsman made, but combined with this background of the White House. And so for me, it was always really exciting because it's almost sort of like the creation of a style which is definable. This is very Obama-ish, right? Obama presidential in a way.
So you did a lot of decorative work there and filling it out and making it seem like a home for them. And there wasn't that much renovation work except for this room. Can you tell us about what you did here?
Well, something that I was always bumping up against, and something that I think is really important, and I think all great decorators or architects deal with first, which is the shortcomings of the space. And this you can see in the way that I sort of inherited. This is post-movement, so you see the big pieces of art, the San Francis on the right, the Ed Ruscha on the left. It's basically the room, the way that it sort of existed. And for me, the ability to not have light, to not have art lighting, to not be able to punctuate the room in some way, to not be able to read a book on a sofa or a chair, to sort of really have to struggle with a little lamp on the piano to play the piano if you're a child, made it something that was really important to me. And with Bob Clark, who's someone who's been very loyal and is sort of one of the country's most prestigious builders of big, sort of huge buildings and projects, he was really wonderful and offered to help. And with he and Robert Truex from San Francisco, who's an incredible lighting designer and lighting manufacturer, we came up with this plan to put sort of state-of-the-art LED lighting in, very, very discreet, as you see, but really punctuating the room and lighting the art, and also making the piano keys lit and making the girls able to do their homework in a chair. So it really took a kind of windowless space and really made it useful and brought it into the 21st century in a way which I think was really important.
A room that comes directly off of the second floor center hall is a yellow oval room, which I know you feel was the most beautiful and most romantic of the rooms there. And this is the version, Jackie Kennedy's yellow oval room, which I think inspired your work here.
Well, exactly. I mean, again, my obsession with history is profound. So the two kind of russet, I think you described them in the book as russet colored velvet chairs, were in the Kennedy room and then basically put away and hadn't been out since. But this room has a lot of elements that are super synonymous with the Kennedys. The three paintings that were owned in tandem with the National Gallery, the sort of French furniture that was gathered from various donors and people who basically sort of gave funds or furniture to the White House, including Brooke Astor and the Reitzmans. So this is my version of the room. I donated this carpet because I was found the perfect scale carpet that, again, funding is always an issue, and there was no real money to purchase it. So I bought it and donated it with this idea that it was so perfect. I had to do my part for future families and this White House. But this is for me the crystallization of my historical obsession with three first ladies and their White Houses. Clearly the Kennedys, which was the beginning and sort of set the form, if you will. I mean, everything from the way the White House is open, the way the White House is financed, the way the White House is protected, all comes from the work of very young First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy and the institutions and structure she put into place in a very short period of time. The next thing is someone who I was friendly with, which is First Lady Nancy Reagan, who I was very influenced by her desire to make these rooms cozy and and approachable and comfortable. And her version of this room had much more red in it, but was quite beautiful. And then, of course, on top of all of it, the taste and aesthetic and desire for practicality and comfort and beauty that is so synonymous with Michelle Obama. So here you see the room in one of its kind of configurations, but you see that people are comfortable. People are sitting in chairs. People are relaxed. They're not upright. They're kind of, really sitting in what is basically a grand version of a very, very beautiful living room.
And this was their living room. I mean, it was the more formal living room, but they did use it as a
living room. Completely.
Yeah,
completely
I love
living room. Yeah.
Those James Magny cocktail tables, I think, were so beautiful.
No, they're beautiful. Okay, and they added a kind of glamour to the room. Also, the yellow oval, I just want to say, is also the doorway to what is most important to many presidential families, which is their only backyard, which is the Truman balcony, which is great.
This, I think, was one of my favorite rooms in the White House, the Treaty Room, which is the president's private office and the family quarters. I know you used a Larson cloth, and then you stenciled this frieze. Tell me about did you talk to him about this? Was it something that you presented to him knowing what he would want? How did this come to be?
Well, I knew that I liked the vibe of the room, the spirit of the room, because it was so synonymous with the Spanish-American War ending and this kind of huge painting that used to be in the room that is a sort of sort of a document of this signing this great treaty. And it has a very much, in everyone's sort of version of the room, it has a very much looking west sense. It's always it has a kind of frontier feeling to it. It's kind of 19th century. And so I wanted to, again, in a very shorthanded way that was sort of organic, not a ton of color, but some color, really make it sort of a kind of fusion of what President Obama would like, but also the elements of the stencil and everything really are reflective of stuff even done during the Kennedy administration in the room, though much more elaborate. It has these kind of 19th century ideas in terms of some of the patterning and stuff. So even some of the chair shapes, the chair the president's sitting in from Baker was very much based on a 19th century kind of tufted chair. But it was, for me, this idea of juxtaposing this great Susan Rothenberg painting of a horse painted by, this Susan Rothenberg, who sadly died this year, but was painted at her ranch in New Mexico across from Caitlin watercolors, I believe early 19th century, from the National Gallery, that are about, sort of depicting and recording Native Americans in juxtaposition of things. The modern West, the documentation of the ancient West was sort of really important for me, because it felt like, this president came as far west as you can go, which is Hawaii. And so I wanted a room which had this sense of history, but also felt that it had a light hand of history, not heavy.
Compare that to the Oval Office, which was probably the most important or most visible room that you did, because many of the rooms that we've seen, actually very few people saw them until the book came out.
Right.
You had said the difference between furnishing and decorating is emotional activity, and I always felt that you felt very connected to the space and what it would mean to the president.
Well, look, I was really fortunate that I didn't do it right away. I mean, it was meant to be done more quickly, but there was a series of, we had one of the biggest financial crises in history existing. It wasn't a time to be redoing one's office. But when the country had a more stable financial position and things were a little bit more normalized, we could actually do it. And for me, I think, again, the stripe, which was super important to me to sort of give a sense of architecture and sort of reiterate the elegance of the shape, was also very much about trying to have the architecture kind of come forward, pop out a bit, to create a little bit of, often in that intense amount of lighting that's needed and constantly in the office, it's sort of camera ready at all times. You see former presidential offices that look quite washed out. And I wanted something that, again, felt approachable and warm and kind of could hold up to the intense amounts of light. So that was super important. And then, there's a lot of stuff in the book we talk about where, the president is all about things that are substantial and intellectual. I mean, even his new book, which is 700 pages, is about his capacity and appreciation and craft with the written word and the spoken word. And I think that things like the carpet being the decoration, if you will, is basically his favorite quotes in text. I mean, he's someone who really understands and appreciates text. And I think things like that were really important to fitting this space and making it personal to him and personal to this administration. And so that was something that was great, that I had the luxury of a little bit of time to kind of work on and distill that essence so that when I did the office, it could really reflect that.
And his private dining room actually works as sort of an adjunct office as well. How did you connect these two rooms in terms of the design?
Well, again, I think the color was very important. I think that I found a carpet, which we did for, his suite consists of a couple rooms. There's a tiny, small, really almost student office, like a kind of real working office where he could write, reflect. There was a chair and ottoman for him to read. I mean, it was a real kind of very small, almost meditative space. And then this dining room where, he really saw lots of congressional leaders. I mean, to be invited to the White House for lunch and with the president would be in this room. And simple, right? It would be a sandwich or something very, very simple. And there's pictures of the book, right? Well, there's that picture right there where you see John Boehner and Secretary and Speaker Pelosi and all having lunch with the president. And, it just was about trying to connect it with color. There's a lot of the same colors from the Oval are woven into these curtains. There's pressed birch bark paper on the walls that have this sort of sense of relating to the exterior of the building, the sense of stone, but it's a sort of handmade organic product, like the hand painted stripe in the outer office. So it's a subtler, more approachable version of the Oval, but something that he used with great success and really felt comfortable there.
And I love what you did in the state dining room. And here Mrs. Obama is at one of the the holiday parties for children that they had, but this is one of the few staterooms that you really became very involved in.
Right, exactly. And this room, I think people, again, the White House is such a funny thing because it's such a moving target, but because it moves so slowly, people think it's always the same. This room, as you know, was originally done by Stanford White for Theodore Roosevelt, and the paneling was mahogany. It was dark mahogany paneling. And at some point, somebody realized that to make it more ceremonial, more grand, that it should be painted out. And so it had always traditionally been painted in one color. And I painted it in three colors in a very kind of classic English manner to kind of pick out. You can see on either side of the Lincoln portrait, the sort of shafts of the columns are a different color than the Capitol. And, really trying to pick out the architecture and really make it a properly painted room. So that was really important to me. And then these curtains, there had been so many different various curtains over the years. Mrs. Bush had done curtains that had every color of every presidential china in them, which is kind of cool. I wanted something that again was a bit more tailored and more almost Jeffersonian, this kind of woven stripe, this silk and linen kind of stripe that was very pretty, that was woven in a mill in Pennsylvania. So again, trying to wherever anything came from, where anything was made, was really important to me and to this family.
And I wanted to show the contrast between the old family dining room. This is where the first families used to dine before Mrs. Kennedy made the private dining room upstairs. What this room was like, and then when you and Mrs. Obama turned it into really this amazing showcase for contemporary art. I think the contrast is enormous, and it's such a beautiful space.
It's a beautiful space, and I think again to energize it, it's a space that often is broken down and used for other, used for staging, used for other events. But it was really important, and I think that as a receptacle of 20th century art, this art was beautiful, including this Rauschenberg that was gifted to the White House by Robert Rauschenberg with a note. When he died, he didn't live long enough to see President Obama elected, but he was so inspired by it that he wanted to give a piece of art in honor of, President Obama becoming, president. He was really captivated by him. So you see this as a receptacle for that amazing art. Sadly, in this administration, a lot of this was put into storage, and this room was used as for a storeroom, which is sort of odd. Hopefully, it'll go back to its use. because it was such a wonderful thing to be able to have a place to house all these incredible paintings and bring the collection really almost up to this moment in terms of its timeline.
And I think it's so interesting. I mean, art, the contribution that you brought in terms of showcasing art in the White House is going to be one of your legacies, in addition to an important one for the Obamas. And I love that these are the binders that you would send to them with options that were available that weren't on view in museums, that weren't on display, that could be borrowed for the White House, and seeing their Post-its and their initials and things were important. And some of the works you brought were the Ed Ruscha, I think bringing photography to the third floor hall where it could be hung without sunlight affecting it. There's the Catherine Opie series from the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago were so beautiful, and it made it seem like windows in a space that doesn't really have windows. And then the importance of this Alma Thomas of Skylight, whose work was also hung in the old family dining room.
Well, right, that the work in the old family dining room was purchased with funds from the White House Historical Association, which is an amazing entity that always, through donations and through other fundraising activities, selling Christmas tree ornaments, they really work to add to the collection, to keep it, to do restorations, to do things constantly. And it's an extraordinary organization. I love the Christmas tree ornaments, and they really do make huge impacts in terms of keeping the collection kind of vital and moving forward. So the Alma Thomas, which was purchased in the old family dining room, is the first female African-American art ever in the permanent collection. So it's something that we're all super proud of.
And I think art meant so much to the Obamas and the White House. And then I know that you were very involved in choosing the artists who did their portraits for the National Portrait Gallery, which I suppose is your last official job as well. I think this was 2018, so 2 years after they left office.
Well, there's still 2 portraits to come for the White House. Don't forget.
We can't wait. You won't even talk to me about them. I know. I don't know. What is that? We've run out of time. But what would you like to have done that you didn't get to do?
Well, you know very well. I mean, there's a few things that I really would have liked to do. The one thing as a legacy I really wanted to leave is, though, again, everything was touched really wonderfully by the Bushes and kept in great order. Having gone to Camp David, and so many world leaders and people go to Camp David so doesn't look like Camp David looks in the movies. I mean, it's wonderful. The people who are there are kind of the best and are so extraordinary, and the treatment you get is just beyond. But the physicality of the cabins and stuff, I worked a little bit on the presidential cabin, but I had an arrangement with a variety of people, including Ralph Lauren and things like that, to really make Camp David into this kind of American showplace to reflect sort of our traditions, our aesthetic in a more profound way to sort of foreign dignitaries and leaders who come to stay there for conferences, et cetera. So that was one thing. And then there were certainly more contemporary art that I wanted to take into that were offered to us by foundations and institutions and stuff. It was wonderful to see a sculpture that is going in under this administration from the Noguchi Foundation, which is somebody that we certainly had talked to a lot, but we just ran out of time. And I think that there were a tremendous amount of other, because artists can't sadly be living when they go into the White House in the permanent collection, there's a series of rules, which makes sense when you look at them. Because of that, there were a bunch of foundations and families and stuff who had wanted to gift pieces. And again, we just didn't have time. So things like that, things like there's no real collection of silver, dishes beyond official presidential china are not really present. There's virtually no photography in the White House permanent collection. Maybe there's 2 or 3 pieces. Just stuff like that would have been great to be able to fill out and have as a resource and as a go-to for future presidential families to make the house their own, and to also make it reflective of the best of America, which was always our overriding theme and objective.
Well, we've also run out of time, actually. And thank you for doing this. It was such a pleasure to work on this book.
Thank you.
And actually to study the history of the White House, which is a major part of your book. It's not just a decorating book. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to LCDQ, and thank you to Gail Singer and Serco. Thanks very
Thanks
much.
so much.
Talk to you later, Michael.